Hey, we haven't had an LDP in a couple weeks. We gave you guys some time off, so why not come back and talk about suicide, right? Yeah. Okay, well, this is a continuation of our Dignity and Respect series, and today we're going to talk a little bit about suicide, actually a lot about it, and we're going to talk a little bit about resiliency and talk about some of the impacts that suicide has on the formation, and then really like you personally as leaders, you know, how you can potentially impact that or self-recognize if you have your own things that you're going through, you know. And as we get closer to redeployment, who's in the aviation in here? You guys are getting pretty close. What, 60? Yeah, not quite. What, 60, 70 days out, something like that, before you're back home?
Not counting.
Okay, not counting. Sergeant Widows, could you go to the next slide for me, please? And I got to thank Sergeant Widows for putting the stuff together here on the computer, so I didn't have to do it. So, the purpose of this LDP is to discuss the impacts of suicide and how we as leaders can recognize through self-awareness signs within ourselves and others that contribute to negative self-speak. The impacts of suicide are far-reaching and unfortunately more common than should be. Leaders need to build upon an environment where individuals belong, which includes feeling comfortable seeking help through behavioral health without having shame or stigma attached. And we'll talk through a little of that. So I guess my stump speech on this thing is that nothing really impacts unit morale or climate more than losing a soldier, right? Maybe sexual assault or harassment, which is another thing that you're almost like losing a soldier in that instance, but it really it impacts the organization specifically. So who here has known a military member that's committed suicide? Please raise your hand. Okay. Who knows a family member or somebody within a close friend that's committed suicide? Yeah, probably about everybody in here. I mean, it's impacted us in one way or another. And the thing that makes suicide a little more impactful in some cases, you know, I've lost soldiers deployed due to the, killed in combat KIAs, but suicide's one of those things that it's almost like you feel like, man, I didn't know that person was going through that. If only I would have known, I could have done something, you know. And there's some of that, but you know, some of it also is on the individual's part, and we'll kind of talk through that a little bit. But next slide. So I just wanted to share, and this is kind of really hard to read, so I'll highlight a few things to talk about the national metrics. You know, and really, what we're getting at here is kind of general statistics around suicide. You can find this stuff out there on the safe.org site. Depression affects about 20 to 25% of Americans right now, 18 plus, given the year. And I would say with COVID, that's probably even higher, you know, right now, as of today. If they retook this, it'd probably be higher. You know, that's a quarter of the population that's suffering from depression, you know, which is a potential impact in suicide itself. 80 to 90% of people that seek treatment for depression are treated successfully using therapy and or medication. So, you know, one thing that shows you, I mean, there's if folks seek treatment, they're most likely gonna benefit from it, right? So, gender disparities, suicide among males is 4 times higher than among females. Male deaths represent 79% of all suicides. So, females, raise your hands. Okay, everybody else is a male in here. So that's, you know, if you look at the population even in this room, it's mostly males, and mostly males in the military in general. With the caveat is females attempt suicide 3 times as often as males. So kind of an interesting statistic. And then females are more likely than males to have had suicidal thoughts. Okay, I'm not going to ask anybody if they've had suicidal thoughts. We'll get into some of the things about that later. But age disparities, when you look at 12.7 in 100,000 young adults ages 20 to 24 die by suicide each year. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-old Americans. Raise your hand if you're in that age bracket, 15 to 24. Okay, a few of you. pointing you out to say, hey, you're at a high risk, but that's the category. And really, who in our formations in that? You know, we've got a lot of soldiers, right, that are in that age category. They're the ones that are susceptible to, you know, a lot of these, they're part of this metric and demographic, so something to consider. Sexual orientation and gender identity, lesbian, gay, and bisexual kids are 3 times more likely than straight kids to attempt suicide at some point in their lives. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting draw out too. So, okay, next slide. So does the military have a suicide problem? Okay, this came out of some demographics that or some suicide report data that you can get off of the site listed at the bottom. You can kind of take a look at that. You know, and this is based on CY 2019. Like I said, don't have the most current data. You know, like what's 2020 look like based on, you know, a number of other factors. But 498 members died by suicide. Military suicide rates are comparable with the U.S. adult population after accounting for age and sex for active component National Guard. So we're basically in line, is what that's saying, with the national population, right? While the 2019 suicide rates for active component appear higher, they are statistically comparable across the past 2 years, but are not going in the desired direction, so they're not going down. Active component suicide rates statistically increased from 2014 to 2019, while the Reserve and National Guard suicide rates did not show evidence of an increase or decrease, no change over this time. And decedents are primarily enlisted, male, and less than 30 years of age, regardless of military population. So there's some data for you if you haven't seen it. Now I know we've just talked a lot about suicide. Who just had to go to the ACEist or ACE classes? Yeah, so I mean, this is just a continuation of kind of that discussion, but we're going to get into a little more detail on some of these things. So I'll pass it off to a better speaker than me, Captain Offit. He has a much better voice. You know, he's
Very white.
very white.
Oh boy. Apparently we got jokes today. Hello everybody, I'm Captain Offit. I think everybody remembers me. Synchronized swimmer.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys remember. A little chuckle, okay, that sounds good. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about suicidal ideation. All right, what is suicidal ideation? When a soldier is thinking about killing him or herself, planning for ways to kill him or herself, hoping not to wake up in the morning, thinking the world will be better off without him or her, and having a sense of hopelessness and helplessness and feeling trapped. So on this slide, the first two are probably the most important, okay? Thinking about killing themselves and making plans to kill themselves, okay? The second two, that's what we call morbid rumination. So if someone calls me and they say, hey, Cap, you know, the little hotline rings and somebody's on the other line, hey, I got this soldier. All right, tell me what's going on with him. Well, yeah, we were sitting there talking and he said, man, if I just didn't wake up tomorrow, I'd be cool with that. Who in here would get worried and think that that soldier is about to kill himself? And you should, but I don't, okay? Because I talk to these people, I say these people, but I talk to people who are dealing with suicidal thoughts every day. And somebody who thinks the world would be better off without them, I'm not too worried about that. We can work through that. Now, the person that's made a plan, it's a little bit different. So continue. The people who raise their hands, continue. If you hear that from a soldier, definitely encourage them, definitely bring them to behavioral health. Next slide, please. All right, before I get into this slide, I want to apologize. I missed a slide, and I missed the warning signs. Slide about the warning signs. So I want to make it a little bit interactive, and I want to ask for any volunteer, anyone who knows any of the warning signs for when someone is contemplating killing themselves in the back.
Giving away your personal property.
Yes, very good, sir. Say again? Oh, she took yours. Likely story, sir. Yes.
Verbally stated they updated their will for a good reason.
Yeah, making preparations for when they're gone. Anyone else? Yes.
It's been seeming like they're depressed for a while, but all of a sudden they have this sense of relief and they're happier.
And why is that? Do you know why that is?
They think relief is in sight.
That's possible. But sometimes when someone's feeling depressed, they just don't have the energy to kill themselves. If they've been depressed for a long time, they don't have the motivation to do it. 'Cause depression kind of robs you of the motivation to do damn near anything. And then all of a sudden you get this energy, and now you got the energy to do it, and that happens quite often, actually. Anybody else?
Could be withdrawal, like if they've already worked through some of the first things and now they're withdrawing from people or situations.
Absolutely. Withdrawal, isolation, isolating themselves, saying goodbye, making preparations, and expressions of hopelessness. Those are the main warning signs that I want you to look for. Okay, now we're going to talk about some risk factors. First and foremost, prior ideation, planning, or suicide attempts. If they've attempted before and they start to exhibit any warning signs, be concerned. Take it seriously at that point. History of sexual and/or physical abuse. Experiencing sexual harassment or assault. Easy access to lethal methods of suicide. Social alienation, hazing, bullying, public humiliation, ostracism, exclusion from activities, interactions, or friendship, mental illness, which you probably won't know about. Definitely a risk factor. Substance abuse, chronic pain, rage, anger, desire for revenge. I'm sorry, next slide. Dramatic changes in mood, anniversary or birthday of dates or events, perceiving burdensomeness to others. All right, next slide.
I think he's one ahead of you.
Yeah, can you go back one? There you go. So these are stressors and triggering events, and when you combine these with the presence of the risk factors that we went over, this increases the potential for suicide. Okay, so career-threatening change of fitness for duty, adverse deployment experiences, suicide or loss of a relative or someone famous or a peer, relationship problems, workplace conflict, pending deployment, failure to be promoted, loss of status. Next slide. Oh, you did. No, that's good. Loss of status, transitions, financial distress, legal issues, combat and operational stress. Anybody have any questions from these stressors, triggering events? Perfect. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about stigma, one of my favorite topics. Why is stigma bad?
Stop people from getting help.
Yeah, for sure. What is stigma, first of all? I think I said it in here one time before. No? Yeah, it was a foot stomping moment. Sergeant Major remembers. What is stigma? Yes?
It's a negative view of seeking help for mental health.
I'll take that one. I'll take that. I got a much simpler, I like to keep things simple. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but I like to keep things simple. Stigma. Stigma is your attitude. What is your attitude about suicide, or about seeking help, or about asking for help, or about a soldier who has needed help? What's your attitude towards that soldier? That's what the stigma is about. Do you have an attitude of, supporting those who go get help, or do you have an attitude that reflects that you frown upon it? Do you highlight the fact that, oh shit, we had to replace you, we had to find someone else to do your work when you went to your behavioral health appointment? That kind of shows the stigma around it. All right, so next slide, please. So how do we get rid of stigma? Talk openly about mental health issues and treatment. Encourage seeking help for others and for yourself. Equality between physical and mental illness. I want to stop there for a second. If you roll your ankle, if you break your leg, or if you had a soldier who broke his leg or sprained something, you're not going to tell them to just suck it up and drive on. You're going to tell them to go get it looked at, because you need them to get back in the fight sooner. It's the same thing with mental health. Put mental health on equal ground as physical health, and then you'll see improvements. And show compassion for those with mental illness. Questions? Next slide. Barry White signing.
All right, before Corey gets up there, destigmatization. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to take you to my attic, all right? Because in my early 20s, when I was going to college, I considered killing myself. I was at college and going through a lot of life changes, didn't have a whole lot of great situation growing up as a kid. Had kind of a interesting family situation, and really didn't feel good about things that was going on. There was alcohol involved, and I was very close at that point in my life to actually doing something about it. Fortunately, I found a spiritual aspect that kind of saved me, and then I met my wife. At the time, we were girlfriend, and her family was fairly into the faith. And I'm not going to talk to you about your journey and if you want to go down a spiritual path, but just having that relationship helped save me. And then fast forward about 10 to 15 years after that situation, married, have a kid, life's going pretty well. I found out that my biological father had committed suicide, and at that point, I didn't really have a relationship with him. He was an alcoholic when I was very young, so my mother divorced, and then we moved out. But what that allowed me to do was connect with my half-brother and half-sister that I'd never met. And through that, and then reconnection with my biological family, I also found out that my uncle had committed suicide, and that we had a family history of depression. And I found out my half-brother has bipolar disorder diagnosed. So long story short, that's a bunch of stuff about me. But what that tells me as an individual is I'm at a different kind of risk category than a lot of other people, right? The one thing that Captain Offutt didn't talk about necessarily was genetic predisposition. And there is a little bit of that. Kind of go back and forth on. So the Mayo did a recent study in 2017 about some of the impacts of that Mayo Clinic, and there is some trends to that. So I've also throughout my life actively sought out behavioral health experts and social workers and things as I've needed it, because I look at it as a capability, right? I don't know everything, and sometimes I got stuff going on and I just need help, and you can talk it out. So I want to talk about destigmatization, because I think it's important that you understand that you may be going through something and you may just need to talk it out. And Corey's going to talk a little bit about resilience, but one of the things when I brought this up when we were putting this LDP together, Captain Offutt talked about, oh my God, you need to get a plan. You should have had a plan. So that's one of the capabilities that, and we'll talk a little bit about a strategy. He's going to go through that here at the end. But there is a way, and actually to have a plan, and a lot of it talks about you personally, and what your warning signs are, and then what do you need to do in that step. So I went over there and I just did that recently, just to understand that process, so that if I have a soldier or know somebody else, because I'm in a really good spot in my life right now, so I don't worry about suicide, but you just never know. You don't know. So you might have somebody that's going through problems, and there's capabilities and things out there that you could leverage. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, because I'm a full believer, and I guarantee, Sergeant Major Strasser and Colonel Adams and any of the chain of command would support people that if you need help or you've got somebody that needs help, there's resources out there. Suck it up, do your part, and go get the help you need, because I think you're more important than that. And I think a lot of this, and we'll watch a video here at the end where people, are struggling with something, and that's that hopelessness and that despair and just wanting to end that that's the final stage. You shouldn't get to that part of the slide, right? And I'll turn it over to the chaplain so he can talk a little bit about that resiliency. So,
stay on this slide here for me, just for a bit. So what's the quality that we as soldiers, that we as people in general, what's the quality that we need to combat suicide, or at least combat the possibility or potential of suicide for any one of us in any given circumstances? What's that quality? Brilliant. How'd you come up with that? Right? How would you define brilliance in your own words? Anybody? Let's have an example or two. How would you define resilience? What is it? Strength. Yeah, good. Anybody else? How would you define resilience?
The ability to bounce back.
Ah, nice. The ability to bounce back. Anybody else want to add to that?
Perseverance.
Perseverance. Yes, absolutely. Next slide, please. Here's how FM 7-22 Holistic Health and Fitness defines resilience. Resilience is the ability to face and cope with adversity, adapt to change, and recover, learn, and grow from setbacks. Who of us here have adversity, change, and setbacks in our lives? We all do, at various times and various degrees. And resiliency is the ability to face and cope with that adversity, the ability to adapt to that change, and the ability to recover, learn, and grow from setbacks. These are inevitable, friends. Adversity, change, setbacks, these are inevitable for the human condition. Resilient leaders can recover quickly from setbacks, shock, injuries, adversity, and stress while maintaining their mission and organizational focus. So is resilience a quality of mental readiness? Absolutely. Along with in FM 7-22, resilience is a quality of mental readiness along with character, behavior, cognitive skill, and social acuity. Does resilience help prevent suicide? Absolutely it does. Of course it does. The more resilient you are, the less likely you are to not only complete suicide, but even to consider suicide. And so resilience is really, really important. Next slide, please. I want to take you back some weeks ago, gave a brief presentation as part of Holistic Health and Fitness on spiritual readiness. Here's the definition from FM 7-22, spiritual readiness. I think this is really important. Of course, I'm biased, but I think this is really, really important. The spiritual readiness is the development of the personal qualities needed to sustain a person in times of stress, hardship, and tragedy. These qualities come from religious, philosophical, or human values and form the basis for character, disposition, decision-making, and integrity. Does spiritual readiness contribute to resilience? Does it? It absolutely does. And if you say no, you're fooling yourself and you're lying. Spiritual readiness absolutely contributes to resilience. That's why it's in FM 7-22 as one of the spheres, one of the realms of holistic health and fitness. I've got one more slide here for you. Comes from the Duke University, prestigious academic institution, the Duke University Center for Spirituality, Theology, and Health. They've done some incredible research on the very real and practical benefits of spiritual readiness, of religion, what they call here religious involvement, which includes religious beliefs and religious practices. And these bullet points come from a very recent study just in the last year, 2020, dealing with how religious involvement, beliefs, and practices have helped people to cope with COVID-19, a pandemic world of the last year. Religious involvement is related to less depression and faster recovery from depression. Religious involvement is related to less alcohol use, abuse, dependence. Religious involvement is related to greater well-being and happiness. And these come from many, many, many studies, in some cases hundreds of studies collaborated to show these truths. Religious involvement is related to greater meaning and purpose, hope and optimism. Religious involvement is related to more exercise, physical activity, healthier diet, less cigarette smoking, and religious involvement is related to better physical immune functions. Now, these aren't absolute in every individual in every case, but overall, there's lots of verified, validated, scientific research studies that show that religious involvement contributes to holistic health and fitness. If this stuff is true, do these things help prevent suicide? You better believe they do. So friends, I want to encourage you to get religious. Seriously, there is holistic health and fitness benefits to religious beliefs and religious practices. That's not just me saying that. The evidence backs that claim up. And I would encourage you to check out their online site. They've got numerous studies you can find and access on there. But it's true. It's true. So that's all I've got. Chapel starts at 10:00 on Sunday morning.
Get that next slide, please. All right, so at this time, what we're going to do is a brief exercise. I want everybody to put their phones, notebooks, PCs, whatever you got in your hands. I'd like you to put it down if you can. And what we're going to do is a mindfulness-based stress reduction exercise. All right, and I'll spare you all the details on how beneficial mindfulness is, because everybody's got a little Google box that they carry around. You can just hit that and Google mindfulness-based stress reduction and see what all the experts say. What I want to do though is give you a brief 5-minute exercise that will potentially be something that you could practice. You could practice this daily and you might get some benefit out of it. All right, so before I go into it, I want to preface it. I want to get you in the right mindset, okay? So it's a mindfulness-based exercise, but a couple of concepts. First, the concept of relaxation, okay? The word relax and the word relaxation has a kind of a fuzzy connotation, I want to say. Because if I call you up and I say, what are you doing? You might tell me something like, I just got off work, I'm sitting here relaxing. And you may or may not be relaxing, okay? Because I can be not even moving, not doing anything, but I'm obviously not relaxed, right? So for this exercise, I want you to think of the concept of relaxation as something that you have to actually, do it. I'm sitting here not relaxed, I'm sitting here relaxed. So it's something you must do. It's an activity. It's an action that you take to relax. Tracking? All right. So when we do this exercise, you're going to relax on purpose for the duration of the exercise. All right. The other concept, people in here roughly, out of 60 people, if I see 60 people, probably 58 of them tell me, you know, that breathing stuff don't work for me. Tracking, sit down, let's breathe. And we do it anyway. All right, so the other concept is breathing. Breathing is this weird body function that if you don't even think about it, it just happens. It happens on autopilot. But you can also breathe any way you want to. You can take full control of your breathing, okay? Like this guy, he just exhaled. Perfect timing, sir. Anyway, so for the exercise, all I want you to think, most people fail with breathing exercises because it usually it's too complex. It's like, you know, inhale for 6 seconds, hold it for 2.8 seconds, release all the air in your lungs over the next 8.5 seconds, and then you get caught up in how long, in, out, so hold, in, out, and then you get frustrated and you quit and you don't practice. But for my exercise, I just want you to breathe on purpose. That's it. Breathe in and breathe out on purpose. Find your own rhythm, okay? So, relax on purpose, meaning let go intentionally, and breathe on purpose. All right, we're gonna get started. So, everybody seems like they can read my mind, because the first step is just get comfortable. Start from the most comfortable position you can achieve right now. Okay? Get as comfortable as you can. That's perfect. That is perfect. All right, so now I want you to start breathing on purpose. I want you to take a nice deep breath in and then release it. And I'm not going to walk you through how to breathe. Just breathe in and breathe out. And fill your lungs and empty your lungs. And find your own rhythm. Find your own depth. Breathe to your own cadence. Just fill your lungs and empty your lungs. And try to achieve a nice, comfortable pattern. Don't make it forced. Don't make it difficult. Just breathe in and breathe out. It's that simple. And now what I want you to do is on the next exhale, I want you to just let your shoulders slump down. Perfect. I saw a lot of people just drop. Perfect. And every exhale, just let go a little bit more. Every exhale, just release a little bit more tension. We're going to do a quick body scan. Start at the top of your head and just follow me down very slowly from the top of your head. Just keep breathing, but every exhale, I want you to move down a little bit and release a little bit more tension. Starting at your eyebrows, your nose, your chin, your neck. Just let it go. Torso. Down past your hips, your legs. On down through your feet. Just let all the tension go that you can perceive in your body. Now what I want you to do is, I want you to take your attention, I want you to focus and pay attention to the sensation of breathing. And what I mean, just notice what it feels like to breathe. Notice what it feels like to expand when you exhale, when you inhale. And notice what it feels like to shrink back down to size when you exhale. Pay attention to what the air feels like as it blows past your nostrils, through your mask. What does that feel like? Now we're going to shift focus for a second. For a moment, I just want you to pay attention to all the sounds that you can hear around you. Just pick them out. Coming from different directions. Different intensities. Some from inside the room, some from outside the room. Some sounds were there the whole time. You only really notice them now because you're paying attention. Now you're going to shift your focus again back to your breathing. And notice what it feels like to breathe now. We're shifting focus again. Now I want you to pay attention and notice the sensation of touch. And what I mean is, notice what the chair feels like supporting you. Notice what your mask feels like on your face and on your ears. What does your uniform feel like on your skin? And your boots on your feet? Take just a couple seconds and check in with your big toe on your right foot. What does your big toe feel like right now, kind of tucked away in your boot? Now we're going to double back to breathing. Focus on your breathing again. And I want you to take 2 deep breaths. When you're ready, that's the end of the exercise.
Did anyone else feel like they were being hypnotized by Dr. Swanson from Office Space?
Yeah. I got nothing for that, sir. I got nothing for that. So let's talk about what we just did. All right. Well, first, any feedback from anyone that noticed anything that they'd like to talk about? Nice. Everybody noticed that, of course. And does anybody feel just a skosh more relaxed than they did before they started? Good. No one else was able to relax a little bit. Interesting. It's interesting. Somebody fell asleep. Okay, it's actually a great exercise to do as you lay down and go to bed. Puts you in the right mindset. So let's talk about what was going on there. That's a non-religious meditation. I don't say non-religious like I don't. No offense, but I got to reach the masses. Non-religious meditation. Okay, it is an exercise that also incorporates a breathing aspect. Okay, so when you're breathing slowly and controlled like that, anyone ever have any experience with someone having a panic attack? Yeah, it doesn't have to be yourself. I mean, you could have been around somebody. Anybody ever seen a movie when somebody's wigging out having a panic attack? Anybody know the prescribed method of turning a panic attack off?
Paper bag.
What are you doing in the paper bag? You're purposely breathing. You're breathing. There is a carbon. There's something to do with the gas exchange and all, but mainly what you're doing is you're breathing on purpose, and you're slowing it down. Slow, controlled breathing turns off anxiety, turns off an anxiety attack. Something else that's going on in that exercise. As you're breathing slowly and relaxing, your heart rate's slowing down, your blood pressure's going down, you're oxygenating your blood. So there are all these physiological benefits that come along with that. The focus shifting, when you're doing that, every second of the day that you're thinking about what your breath feels like, you're not thinking about whatever is pissing you off, whatever's got you upset. So it's a bona fide it's what taking a breather is supposed to be. That's taking a breather. You're breathing and focusing on what that feels like. You're not focused on the affairs of the day that are going to be there when you finish the exercise. They'll still be there. The other thing, that's about it. Focus shifting, breathing. But yeah, look up mindfulness-based, or just look up the term mindfulness. And if you really want to get a laugh, look at a little video called "Mindfulness is a Superpower." And when you see me, talk to me about it. Cool.
So just an additional plug, any pilots in here? Yeah, a few. Have you guys, gals used something like this to get to sleep if you have to have flight hour, you got to be down? I watched the YouTube video, that's why I'm asking, and that exact technique is something I've used in the past to get to bed, just to relax. But if you want to make it a habit, maybe you don't do it for 5 minutes, maybe do it for 30 seconds, just build that habit over time, and then that'll get you to sleep pretty quick if you're laying on your back. So, shameless, we're going to watch a video to wrap this up. Shameless plug though, for the medical company. We've got resources here. We've got behavioral health. We've got a dentist. We've got an optometrist. We've got a nurse. We've got a physical therapist. We've got all kinds of help over there. You got 60, you got 90 days. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. Chaplain just gave you, if you want to talk about spiritual, enlightenment, when he talks about holistic fitness too, spiritual doesn't just mean you have to be a Christian. Obviously that's his wheelhouse, but there's other aspects to that too that you can take a look at when we talk about the broad term of spiritual, believing in something. Okay, we're going to watch this. Is there anybody? We're going to finish with the video. Does anybody have any comments or things they want to add to the discussion about suicide and kind of resiliency?
So I have to point out, I think your testimony, or whatever you want to call it, I think it would go a long way if the audience, this is a good audience, but talk about the junior enlisted, the younger soldiers, they're the ones that need to hear that. And we can relay that to them, but that was powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't, you don't like to go into the attic. I'm sure everybody has stories that they could share, but from a senior leader perspective, happy to talk to anybody more about my personal experience. But the other thing is, how do we talk about this to our soldiers? Hey, do you feel like committing suicide today, Sergeant Aldridge? Maybe not. Maybe that's not the approach. They'll talk about that if you're having somebody in a problem spot. But really, I think a approach is a small group and just, hey, do you know anybody that's had committed suicide? How'd that make you feel? Just ask loaded questions to get dialogue going, and then listen. And that's really what the point of what this video is going to talk about is. I want you guys to listen, and gals, to the speaker and his discussion on listening. And that, I think that's really the important part, because a lot of people that are struggling with things, they just want somebody to listen to them. Maybe they're not feeling like they belong and they don't have that. So that's where sometimes if you look at spiritually talking to somebody, and if you feel like that, higher powers listening to you, that's another avenue to help get through some of this stuff. But any other questions or comments? Right, Sergeant Widows, do you mind kicking that off?
Brandon, can you hit the...
I recently retired from the California Highway Patrol after 23 years of service. The majority of those 23 years was spent patrolling the southern end of Marin County, which includes the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge is an iconic structure, known worldwide for its beautiful views of San Francisco, the Pacific Ocean, and its inspiring architecture. Unfortunately, there's also a magnet for suicide, being one of the most utilized sites in the world. The Golden Gate Bridge opened in 1937. Joseph Strauss, chief engineer in charge of building the bridge, was quoted as saying, "The bridge is practically suicide-proof. Suicide from the bridge is neither practical nor probable. But since its opening, over 1,600 people have leapt to their death from that bridge." Some believe that traveling between the two towers will lead you to another dimension. This bridge has been romanticized as such. That the fall from that frees you from all your worries and grief, and the waters below will cleanse your soul. But let me tell you what actually occurs when the bridge is used as a means of suicide. After a free fall of 4 to 5 seconds, the body strikes the water at about 75 miles an hour. That impact shatters bones, some of which then puncture vital organs. Most die on impact. Those that don't generally flail in the water helplessly and then drown. I don't think that those who contemplate this method of suicide realize how grisly a death that they will face. This is the cord. Except for around the two towers, there's 32 inches of steel paralleling the bridge. This is where most folks stand before taking their lives. I can tell you from experience that once the person is on that cord, and at their darkest time, it is very difficult to bring them back. I took this photo last year as this young woman spoke to an officer contemplating her life. I want to tell you very happily that we were successful that day in getting her back over the rail. When I first began working on the bridge, we had no formal training. You struggled to funnel your way through these calls. This was not only the service to those contemplating suicide, but to the officers as well. We've come a long, long way since then. Now, veteran officers and psychologists train new officers. This is Jason Garber. I met Jason on July 22nd of last year when I received a call of a possible suicidal subject sitting on the cord near mid-span. I responded, and when I arrived, I observed Jason speaking to a Golden Gate Bridge officer. Jason was just 32 years old and had flown out here from New Jersey. As a matter of fact, he had flown out here on 2 other occasions from New Jersey to attempt suicide on this bridge. After about an hour of speaking with Jason, he asked us if we knew the story of Pandora's box. Recalling your Greek mythology, Zeus created Pandora and sent her down to earth with a box and told her never ever open that box. One day curiosity got the better of Pandora and she did open the box. Out flew plagues, sorrows, and all sorts of evils against man. The only good thing in the box was hope. Jason then asked us, what happens when you open the box and hope isn't there? He paused a few moments, leaned to his right, and was gone. This kind, intelligent young man from New Jersey had just committed suicide. I spoke with Jason's parents that evening, and I suppose that when I was speaking with them that I didn't sound as if I was doing very well. Because that very next day, their family rabbi called to check on me. Jason's parents had asked him to do so. The collateral damage of suicide affects so many people. I pose these questions to you. What would you do if your family member, friend, or loved one was suicidal? What would you say? Would you know what to say? In my experience, it's not just the talking that you do, but the listening. Listen to understand. Don't argue, blame, or tell the person you know how they feel, because you probably don't. By just being there, you may just be the turning point that they need. If you think someone is suicidal, don't be afraid to confront them and ask the question. One way of asking the question is like this. Others in similar circumstances have thought about ending their life. Have you had these thoughts? Confronting the person head on may just save their life and be a turning point for them. Some other signs to look for: hopelessness, believing that things are terrible and never going to get better. Helplessness, believing that there's nothing that you can do about it. Recent social withdrawal and loss of interest in life. I came with this talk just a couple of days ago, and I received an email from a lady that I'd like to read you her letter. She lost her son on January 19th of this year. And she wrote me this email just a couple of days ago. And it's with her permission and blessing that I read this to you. Hi, Kevin. I imagine you're at the TED conference. That must be quite the experience to be there. I'm thinking I should go walk the bridge this weekend. Just wanted to drop you a note. Hope you get the word out to many people, and they go home talking about it to their friends who tell their friends, etc. I'm still pretty numb, but noticing more moments of really realizing Mike isn't coming home. Mike was driving from Petaluma to San Francisco to watch the 49er game with his father on January 19th. He never made it there. I called Petaluma police and reported him missing that evening. The next morning, 2 officers came to my home and reported that Mike's car was down at the bridge. A witness had observed him jumping off the bridge at 1:58 p.m. the previous day. Thanks so much for standing up for those who may be only temporarily too weak to stand for themselves. Who hasn't been low before without suffering from a true mental illness? It shouldn't be so easy to end it. My prayers are with you for your fight. The GGB, Golden Gate Bridge, is supposed to be a passage across our beautiful bay, not a graveyard. Good luck this week. Vicky. I can't imagine the courage it takes for her to go down to that bridge and walk the path that her son took that day. And also the courage just to carry on. I'd like to introduce you to a man I refer to as hope and courage. On March 11th of 2005, I responded to a radio call of a possible suicidal subject on the bridge sidewalk near the North Tower. I rode my motorcycle down the sidewalk and observed this man, Kevin Berthia, standing on the sidewalk. When he saw me, he immediately traversed that pedestrian rail and stood on that small pipe which goes around the tower. For the next hour and a half, I listened as Kevin spoke about his depression and hopelessness. Kevin decided on his own that day to come back over that rail and give life another chance. When Kevin came back over, I congratulated him. This is a new beginning, a new life. But I asked him, what was it that made you come back and give hope and life another chance? And you know what he told me? He said, you listened. You let me speak, and you just listened. Shortly after this incident, I received a letter from Kevin's mother. And I have that letter with me. And I'd like to read it to you. Dear Mr. Briggs, nothing will erase the events of March 11th, but you are one of the reasons Kevin is still with us. I truly believe Kevin was crying out for help. He has been diagnosed with a mental illness for which he has been properly medicated. I adopted Kevin when he was only 6 months old, completely unaware of any hereditary traits. But thank God, now we know. Kevin is straight, as he says. We truly thank God for you. Sincerely indebted to you, Narvella Berthia. And on the bottom, she writes, P.S. When I visited San Francisco General Hospital that evening, you were listed as the patient. Boy, did I have to straighten that one out. Today, Kevin is a loving father and contributing member of society. He speaks openly about the events that day and his depression in the hopes that his story will inspire others. Suicide is not just something I've encountered on the job. It's personal. My grandfather committed suicide by poisoning. That act, although ending his own pain, robbed me from ever getting to know him. This is what suicide does. For most suicidal folks, or those contemplating suicide, they wouldn't think of hurting another person. They just want their own pain to end. Typically, this is accomplished in just 3 ways: sleep, drugs or alcohol, or death. In my career, I've responded to and been involved in hundreds of mental illness and suicide calls around the bridge. Of those incidents I've been directly involved with, I've only lost 2, but that's 2 too many. One was Jason. The other was a man I spoke to for about an hour. During that time, he shook my hand on 3 occasions. On that final handshake, he looked at me and he said, Kevin, I'm sorry, but I have to go. And he left. Horrible, absolutely horrible. I do want to tell you though, the vast majority of folks that we do get to contact on that bridge do not commit suicide. Additionally, that very few who have jumped off the bridge and lived and can talk about it, that 1 to 2%, most of those folks have said that the second that they let go of that rail, they knew that they had made a mistake and they wanted to live. I tell people, the bridge not only connects Marin to San Francisco, but people together also. That connection or bridge that we make is something that each and every one of us should strive to do. Suicide is preventable. There is help. There is hope. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll end it with that. It's kind of a sobering video, but I think the end state is, like he said, hope, there's courage, listen. But I think we're never going to stop all people from committing suicide. There's probably going to be people in the future that, in our formation or organization, that may commit that act. But what we can do is understand the signs, symptoms, destigmatize getting help, and trying to do our best to actively listen to our soldiers. So with that, we'll let you guys get out of here and have a good rest of your Monday, 1700.